Hey there guys, it's Metro, and we are back yet again today with another one of these types of videos. These are really fun to do. They're fun to do. They're fun to see your guys' reaction to. So we're going to go ahead and do it. This is another post that I'm trying to read and kind of spread awareness on. This is a Mythic Plus feedback thread. Now, if you're not aware, I believe it was Bornak who posted a Islands thread. And, say what you will, about a week after it was closed, there was island changes in the game. Maybe they weren't the most significant changes, but there was island changes nonetheless. So, I think they're definitely thinking about, actually listening to feedback and trying to incorporate it. You just have to realize that if your feedback is, I don't like this system, it should be completely changed, they're probably not going to listen to that. Okay. You have to realize that whatever you say in these feedback threads has to at least align with their goals for the system. So a lot of the people in this thread are going to be complaining about too much trash or it being too difficult. That's the point. Okay. It's supposed to be difficult and the trash is supposed to be hard. So anyway, we're going to read this entire thread. There's 256 replies, so it's not nearly as long as some of the other ones, but a lot of them are replies to other people, so I'm not exactly sure how to deal with that. If anybody does know anything more about this feature here, this summarize this topic feature, it's apparently going to take me an hour and 7 minutes to read this. I don't think it will, but anyway, summarize this topic. I was hoping that what it was going to do was it was just going to make it so only first posts in this thread would appear, but that doesn't seem like that's what happens. So I don't know. If anybody knows anything more about that, let me know, but I guess I would probably be the more likely to know more about that. So anyway, we're going to read the thread. Here we go. And again, give my thoughts where they're applicable, and hopefully you'll give yours as we go. So anyway, Ythisens. What's up, buddy? Hey there, guys. It's Ythisens. We recently saw a number of changes to Mythic Plus dungeons and recent Tides of Vengeance update. Now that you've all experienced these changes for a couple weeks, we wanted to take a moment and see what your thoughts are on them. This can be about anything you've experienced since then. This can be a specific dungeons, affixes, or the system as a whole. If you haven't yet tried some of the retuned dungeons, I encourage you to try them out before commenting, as some dungeons like Sethrallis, King's Rest, and Buralus received a few big changes. All of the dungeons received tuning changes in some form, but those last three were the biggest. Would you really say Buralus was the biggest? I don't know. Anyway, thanks for taking the time and sharing your thoughts. No problem, man. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. No, we're not ending there. So we're going to go through every single one, okay? Well, like I said, we're probably going to avoid the ones that it's like just replies to other people that clearly aren't related to the actual feedback. But anyway, Kayatostrophe says, thank you so much for the temple changes. You don't have to thank me, man. I didn't do it. I don't know. It's not me, so I don't know what to tell you. Chris Montrix says, thank you for taking the time to gather feedback for the community. This is something that is really appreciated, and we genuinely are elated to give response to. That's good to hear, because you should be. One major thing that I do notice when pushing higher keys on Tyrannical specifically is that some of the HP on bosses seems to be astronomically scaled. I would like to see HP on some particular bosses, finals in Atal'Dazar and Shrine specifically. Yeah, the last boss in Atal is unique, right? We'll talk about that. Scale back a little bit. Shrine of the Storm, with the changes in the way the damage increased debuff is applied, makes it feel like the boss pool of health is simply too large. I definitely agree. Shrine has already been nerfed, by the way, in case you guys aren't aware. But definitely agree that Atal'Dazar's last boss is a very, very long fight. But that's because you have to constantly fight adds. And that's kind of the same reason that Shrines was really long, right? It's almost identical, but the problem with Shrine was you actually can't even attack the boss for a significant period of time. It's not just like on Atal where you're attacking ads, but the boss is still there. It's different. The ads are a whole different phase. So I'm definitely glad that they nerfed that. And he's going to say that here shortly. I pretty much exclusively run Mythic Plus with friends and in guild, nothing higher than a 12. So this may not apply to most players. However, overall, I feel like the dungeons take too long, are more punishing of mistakes, and have way too much trash compared to Legion. The weekly chest reward can be decent, but the end of chest rewards seem lackluster compared to Legion. They're the exact same, dude. Bottom line is Legion Mythic Plus seem more fun than BFA ones do. So, I mean, this is the problem, right? If you're talking about you don't have any aspirations to do higher than a 12, and you feel like the dungeons take too long, which they don't, they're quicker than Legion, are more punishing of mistakes, and have way too much trash compared to Legion, despite the trash being part of the timer. It's like, I don't know what we're talking about here. You know what I mean? You don't want the dungeons to be difficult. That's what you're saying. You don't care about difficulty, and you don't actually want them to be hard. That's not how the system works, man. I don't know what to tell you. And this is the scary part, right? 30 likes. It's like, I don't know what to tell you, dude. Like, you don't you don't like the system. That's all there is to it. Just because Legion dungeons were easier doesn't mean that these need to become easier just so you could have more fun. Just get better at the game. Especially if you're not even doing higher than a 12. How long could they possibly take? You know what I mean? What are we talking about? I don't know. This is the kind of thing that really worries me, because these are the people who are like, they're not listening to our feedback. It's like, dude, you told them to make the goddamn dungeons easier and shorter. They're not long. The timers are like 35 minutes each. I'd have to look at a list of the timers, but somebody down below, tell me what's the longest dungeon? What's the average dungeon? They're not, like, there was ones in Legion that were like an hour. You know what I mean? Freaking Halls of Valor was like a 2-hour timer half the time, it felt like. Anyway, Ythisens replies, funny enough, the team is actually looking at the final boss health in Shrine, and I think they're testing some changes to it. Nothing to share exactly on it, but it's being looked at. I'll mention it all as well. Yeah, so that's good. But I should have mentioned this at the start, but if you're still, I just want to say, one of the main reasons I'm doing this is because this dude is actually reading these threads, okay? Maybe, like, not right now, but he was at one point, and he will again, okay? So if you're watching this and this thread is not locked and you have feedback you want to give, don't just post it in the comments. Go to this thread. And I don't know, maybe there's no EU equivalent, I'm not sure. But either way, like, this is why it's here, okay? So if you have something you want to say about Mythic Plus, go post it there. Even if it's Mythic Plus is great, like, you're down Machiavelli. There's no problems with Mythic Plus. Well, you're on EU, but just go post, you know what I mean? Just go tell them so they know. So we don't have this kind of stuff getting 30 likes, you know what I mean? And everybody's thinking that the dungeons take too long. It's wrong. They don't. They don't take any longer than they did in Legion. I don't know, man. I am by no means a high-end Plus player. My IO is 713, and I'm fine with that. It's such a shame, by the way. It's such a shame that we're talking about this. Such a shame that this is brought up on an official Blizzard. Anyway. What I have noticed is that teaming did not seem nearly as bad, even with Infested. However, the percentages felt a little off on the low end. Yeah, the mother load percentage really threw me for a loop last week or whatever. Listening to guild members do an 11 toll, and it seemed to be much better tuned. Thank you for opening these lines of communication on the issues. It goes a long way in communication us players have been asking for. So the toll to gore change, again, these are the kind of things it's like, it seemed to have been much better tuned. They didn't really change anything, man. It didn't really change. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just kind of like that, what do you call that? Placebo effect, honestly. Oh, here we go. I know key deletion was never intended to be in the game, but it was a great quality of life feature. It would have been great to have some way of re-rolling your keystone. I enjoy all the BFA dungeons, but sometimes you just keep getting the same keys over and over again, and that gets boring. 100% agree. I really wish there was a way that you could change your keystone. And we've been talking about this for a while. I actually suggested something like that in this thread, I believe. But how about this? How about this Keystone vendor that's on the PTR? If you guys haven't seen it, it's basically the vendor from the tournament realm. You could make your own key. It's like a smorgasbord. You know what I mean? You got a key vendor. It gives you a key with no affixes. Then you buy the affix that you want to put on the key. You know, the first level, the second level, and the third level. And voila, that's it. You got a key now. You know what I mean? So how about if they have, and then you could also pick the dungeon too, by the way. Otherwise, it has no dungeon. It's just a keystone. You can pick the dungeon, you can pick the affixes. Well, they're not going to let you pick the affixes. But how about we pick the dungeon? And how about we pick the level too? The level's on there as well on that vendor. And how about if buying those things requires a currency, and say the cost of that currency either maybe increases each time you do it each week, or it increases based on the difficulty that you're buying. So if you got a 12 key, it maybe costs 12 of these resources. And say maybe you got a 13 key, it costs 13. Or maybe you got a 20 key and it costs 50. You know, I don't know how you want to do it, but how about something like that where you're actually encouraged to complete the dungeon to get this currency? So say maybe completing a 12 gives maybe 2 of this currency, or maybe 5. I don't know. You know, however the proportions want to go. And you get this currency from completing the key. So now there's even more reason to stay and get the key. So then you could use that currency to buy a reroll token or buy a different dungeon. You know, even if you can't choose which dungeon you want, because maybe that's a little bit ridiculous. But still, you gotta run the key. You gotta run keys in general until you get enough currency to buy something to reroll your key. I think that's the best idea. But just deleting keys, this is not functional. Okay, this was bugged and extremely abused. If you guys aren't aware, people would just delete all, like a push group would delete all their keys just so they could constantly get a better key. You know, if they have a key they don't want to push, they just delete it and get a brand new one. That's not functional. You know what I mean? That's not the way the system was designed. So it was a nice quality of life feature, but there's a much better option out there, and I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on what I suggested. All right, anyway, I don't think some of the changes went far enough. Several of the nerfs to Shrine were to increase the recast of several abilities. I looked at that as an intentional change to reduce the reliance of double melee plus range simply for the faster interrupts. The second and third boss, Voidbolt on Stormsong, hits so damn hard on Tyrannical. And the AE casters, I guess area of effect casters, after the second boss, still chain endlessly with no lockout. There's some trash pulls in dungeons that need to be looked at. A big on here would be the last pull of Freehold, being so absurd it's skipped by almost everyone. Just remove an enforcer from that pack and call it a day. Please look at the first boss in King's Rest. This is so many different topics. So let's talk about this first of all. They did change. I don't think there really is much to talk about. They already nerfed Shrine of Storm a little bit more. Trash pulls in dungeons being hard is intentional. The last thing in Freehold is skipped by everybody on purpose. That's, it makes the room more interesting. It allows you to use your brain and careful planning to skip it. So that's perfectly fine. Removing an enforcer from that pack isn't going to change anything. You'd still be overcount, so you wouldn't need that pack anyway. Please look at the first boss in King's Rest. Spit Gold does way too much damage. That's already been nerfed. Fortified versus Tyrannical is not balanced in the slightest. I disagree. It is definitely balanced, but yeah, it could be balanced better. BFA made Trash way harder, and bosses outside of a few that are particularly nasty made Fortified the way harder of the two affixes. That's true. Trash is definitely way harder in BFA, and I think that's intentional. There's always going to be one that's way harder, right? You know what I mean? Like, you can't... Do you want to go back to Legion where you just can't push keys at all because it's Tyrannical? At least on Fortified, you're not, you're not wiping the trash over and over again. You know what I mean? I don't know. This is even more true of the damage intake side of tanking. I wouldn't mind seeing them drop from 20% health to 20% damage. I would say it should go up. I think the fact that we're doing 20s in the first tier is not good. I don't like this, and I don't know. I guess a lot of kiting is going on. We tried that 13 or what was it? Yeah, 13 on the beta, and it was very, very, very hard. So I like that. I would rather it stay that way. You know what I mean? By the way, I'm talking about a 13 with reaping and people in 415 gear, and we failed to upgrade the key by almost a half hour. Okay, so I think that's the way it should be. I don't want to see people doing 20s. It just doesn't seem right this early on. Anyway, I was really big into Mythic Plus and Legion and had a very high IO score on my main. That's good for you, man. I've not touched Mythic Plus and BFA since the first week it launched. That's a shame. You're probably really behind in gear. The reason I loved it in Legion and hated it in BFA is simple. The dungeons that came out in Legion were from before Mythic Plus was a thing. They were very enjoyable to play on Mythic Plus. I mean, think about what you just said there, right? The dungeons were not made for Mythic Plus in mind. That made it more fun. The end of Legion, Blizzard designed the worst and least fun dungeon in the Seat of Triumvirate. Or maybe they designed the best designed dungeon. That's what they wanted the whole time. You know what I mean? I don't know. This was intended to be the first dungeon designed with Mythic Plus. You don't know that. In mind, and was by far the least liked by the community. That's conjecture. But anyway, it was definitely a pretty hard dungeon. You're right. You then took this design and created all BFA dungeons to have way more ads than needed and made the dungeons very tedious to run. I wish that were true. Created all BFA dungeons. I mean, there's a couple that are like that for sure. On top of this, your dev team gave the ads in Mythic Plus extremely annoying abilities that did not exist in Legion. Like way too many have knockbacks. Which have knockbacks? There's like 2 mobs that have knockbacks, right? Stuns? I don't know. I guess I don't notice as a Death Knight. My suggestion, not that it will be even considered, is to please go back to the way dungeons were in early Legion. Well, I'm glad you admit this. I'm glad you understand that this is not going to be considered. Because this was not intentional, right? You just admitted to this yourself in your own post. They're not going to go back to when they didn't design dungeons with Mythic Plus in mind. That doesn't even make sense. That wasn't intentional. You know what I mean? Mythic Plus was a great success and removed a huge amount of ads. First of all, the ads are stupid. This is stupid that you're even bringing this up. Count is factored into the timer. Why are we talking about this? What are you talking about? Trash is harder, but you have the same amount of time. It's not like you can't upgrade the keys because of the trash. You know what I mean? I don't know what we're even talking about. You had the same percentage of mobs needed in each dungeon in Legion and BFA. It's not like there's just more trash that you have to kill now. Anyway, take away the annoying ability that turns something into something that should be a fun competitive event. These two things don't go together, by the way. Into an annoying drag that is not worth the effort. I mean, it clearly is worth the effort if you looked at my character. So anyway, let's move on, because obviously I don't agree with anything that person is saying. And I hope they understand that none of this is going to happen, by the way. So I'm not a fan of how interrupt-oriented Shrine of the Storm is. It is odd, right? How this dungeon just has tons of casts and almost no other dungeons do. Like, look at Freehold. There's almost nothing to interrupt. Having more than one ranged class that isn't an elemental shaman can make things extremely difficult. On some bosses, losing a melee can basically equal a wipe. That's true. But that's why Ellie's so good, right? I've also been keen on having my battle res taken from me when they're so... Wait, I've not been keen. What do you mean having it taken from you? Oh, does Hunter not have battle res anymore? I guess not, yeah. The engineering item helps, but having to use it in melee range and have a cast time can be difficult. Not to mention you have to be an engineer, yes, of course. As someone who plays from the Oceanic region on an NA realm, I greatly appreciate the changes made in Temple of Snakes that slowed down some of the environmental obstacles. Yeah, that's a good one. Please, for the love of dog, fix the pathing on the last boss in Siege. Having to dismiss my pet and it still bugs out makes me want to yeet my gun into the ocean depths. What the hell does that mean? Anyway, okay. Yeah, it is weird. Shrine is a very odd dungeon compared to every other dungeon, but I think they probably did that on purpose. Let's put it that way. The spawn rate of tentacles during the last boss in Siege is something you should look into. The spawn rate of tentacles during the last boss in Siege is something you should look into. Why is that? There's a cap, right? They can only spawn so many, so it's actually a DPS check on the fight. The quicker you kill them, the easier the fight is. So that's something that you should look into, I think. Unless I'm confused. If you're going to limit the debuff/buff to exclusively healers and Shrine, you should really look at the boss's health. That's already been done. For overall balance, I'd seriously consider looking at the CD of invisibility potions as a whole. This is a great suggestion. While you rightfully targeted Blood DK dominance and Mythic Plus as a whole, they didn't really. Nothing has been done to curb a class that essentially exists in every composition, rogues. It's true. Shroud shouldn't be removed or changed, but eliminating reliance on it can be done with smart changes to invisibility potions. I agree. Why they have a 10-minute CD in a world where we are forced to kill a certain number of mobs per percent anyway is completely beyond me. That's actually a good point. It certainly shouldn't be more than 1 minute CD, but locking invis potions to 2 to 5 minute CD would certainly make the possibility of using them an actual decision. Yeah, so let me put it this way. I'm not ever going to use an invisibility potion in 5-mans, at least not in the beginning. If anybody ever says invis pot out of the poll, thanks for stopping by. I'm not going to... There's just no... Like, you're wasting so many potions. You know what I mean? Potentially 10 potions you're wasting on that. It's absurd. It's just not worth it. So, what they should do is, it should be a 10-minute potion not tied to another potion CD. I think that's the answer, and I'm really surprised it took them this long to get to this point. I don't know how they don't realize that that's the answer. Like, where else are invis pots limiting you? You know what I mean? It's not like you use them in raids or PvP or something. You know what I mean? I don't really know. Okay, Bao says, the changes you made to Grievous make it worse. I read this earlier. I don't understand what he's talking about. A number of posts have worked through proofs. Did they? I think you're outdated, because there was some evidence that the first change made it worse, and then they nerfed it again. So am I wrong about this? I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure this is not correct. I'm pretty sure Grievous is now easier to deal with, considering I soloed a 10 Ataldazar on the beta with Grievous. Can't be that hard. Can't be that bad. Anyway, some affixes like quacking and busting can be annoying for the healer to drink up to after the pack, as it will interrupt drinking. Not to mention the healer's already behind with the unavoidable damage. I feel like when I need to drink, I'll have to constantly eat food to get around it, and it is annoying. Yeah, you know what the problem is this being looked at? Unlikely. But you know what the problem is here? Quacking, I guess busting. I mean, first of all, busting is like, I mean, if you're drinking during busting, you're doing something seriously wrong. But quacking is the one, right? Quacking is you get interrupted. That shouldn't happen. Just change that. Can you change that? You know what I mean? Just change that. There's no reason for that. If you're drinking during an out-of-combat mechanic and you get hit by something that doesn't put you in combat, you should not stand up. Okay, Vero, it's a big, I want to try to start not reading these things. Let's see. Okay, we're good. It's a big improvement for sure. I think Fortified still sucks a bit in general. Still makes anything above a 13 trash just start to take a long time. I love that, by the way. I'm not a fan of bolstering, Sanguine, or Grievous. Sanguine and Bolster just really annoying in almost all BFA dungeon designs. Yeah, bolstering, I don't know. Sanguine, definitely agree. Not only how they work as an affix, but how they work with other affixes and the dungeon designs layouts as well. Yeah, Sanguine combined with some of these layouts is very, very challenging. And that, you know, again, I think that's what they want. Grievous design output still seems really high. Can't agree with that, obviously, based on what I did on the PTR. I also think the AP reward should be better, especially on the weekly cash. But the repeatable award could use a small bump as well, IMO. Ah, that's a good one. That's a good one. So, first of all, people who are saying like that the rewards are not good enough, man. I don't know what game you guys are playing. But the repeatable award, I think maybe they should be more AP. I think this might be the actual, you know, like every dungeon gives maybe twice the AP. Because right now it seems like it gives very little AP for the amount of time you have to spend in them. And it's only going to get worse with reaping. So I would definitely like to see the AP rewards go up. Maybe by double, but maybe that's too much. But yeah, the gear itself is perfect if you ask me. It would also be really awesome if we could target slots in the cache somehow. So yeah, this was another suggestion that we might see again in here. But basically, like, you get a 1 of 3 choice. 3 items are in the cache, you get to choose 1. That's something that was talked about, I think, even on the beta. And I like the idea. I do. But I don't know if they do. You know what I mean? It is a very, very, very large pool of dungeon items. So I understand the problems that, especially if you get the same piece twice. That must suck. That's really unlucky. But I don't know about choosing gear. I would echo that Shrine still feels pretty brutal. Yeah, they changed it. I think it feels a lot better. Considering we did it on the beta yesterday, we one-phased the encounter. Boss there, goes down, comes up, lost, dead. Dead before another ad phase. So that's huge. Anyway, hello. I like most of the changes to Mythic Plus that were made. They did address quite a few of the pain points. I would like to see some more work done, specifically on tuning dungeons with the affixes. Okay. Under Rot this past week was a nightmare on the final boss. The volcano spawning because of the orbs was insane. They already nerfed that. There really needs to be better tuning on all dungeons with little spawns on the bosses for things like volcanoes and explosive orbs. Oh no, maybe it was the explosive orbs that they nerfed on that fight. Yeah. The last boss on Atal Dazar was also very interesting with the volcanoes, but it wasn't as punishing as Under Rot. I mean, that's the affix, guys. Volcanic's the easiest affix. Come on, man. Just why is it always we got to make things easier? You know what I mean? That's the only time the mechanic is a thing. I don't know. I'm not impressed at all with the changes in Siege of Brass. The changes made to the last boss with the tentacle timing is grueling and unforgiving. I don't know what they're talking about. The boss was hard enough as it was, and the changes honestly have made it worse. I think what they're talking about is like that final platform's tentacle will aggro you before you get to it. So if you're not quick to get over there, it starts like hull cracking or whatever the slamming the deck mechanic is. Yeah, that's kind of rough. That's kind of rough. So, but I don't know. I'm not sure either, because it's like the solution to that is just to go back to the way it was, and then people just skip it. That's not intended either. So it has to definitely aggro you. Okay, this is the first reply. I don't really want to read replies, but it's got to, let's see. Agree with this. There's nothing short, like there is nothing short to run. With Legion, there were short ones like Maw and Court of Stars, and the long ones, okay. So at least people understand. This isn't the case in BFA, by the way. There's no short and long dungeons. They're all the same length, right? I'm pretty sure they're all within a few minutes of each other. If you guys have that evidence, let me know. I need to look it up. Everything feels tediously long in BFA, but it's not. It's the same length. It's actually probably shorter than the dungeons in Legion. Mob kills seem high all the time. They're not. They're the same. It would be nice if some were lowered to make them shorter dungeons with shorter timers too. So you want them to just lower the health of trash that's already there, and then shorten the timer? Do we want that? Like, come on, man. Especially with reaping, like I don't know. I don't think we want that. I think people need to just stop making things up about 5-mans. Like I really do. If it feels tediously long, then you just don't like the game. I don't know what to tell you. Like it's not the trash's fault. The trash percentage and the time per spent on trash. You know what I mean? It's not like bosses were taking like 10 minutes in Legion. You know what I mean? They were still like about as long on Tyrannical as they are now. They're just way more dangerous in Legion. So I don't really know. But yeah, obviously utility really needs to be better spread out among classes, especially things like Shroud and various knockbacks. This is a really odd comment, but the Shroud thing, I definitely agree. They need to give somebody else some type of skip. Maybe, Mage, I don't know. I don't know who they can give it. Somebody brought up Feral Druid. If they gave some kind of like, pack, like some pack ability, like a Feral Druid gets an AoE stealth as well. That would be cool. But this is really I don't understand. Comparing the lousy knockbacks like Priest and Shaman. What the hell are you talking about? Did you just say Priest and Shaman have lousy knockbacks? How is that? First of all, Monks is not a knockback. Anyway, I don't know. I have a couple things to note. First, the person you quoted does have an actual point. Tyrannical after certain level bosses just take far too long. This includes places like Siege. I think this becomes noticeable after 15. Shrine since the shrine to list off the top of my head. Sure. Second, there is no reason to push anything beyond a 10 outside of Rio, and there are no rewards. What challenge modes did right? Challenge modes had no rewards at all. You did them once, and that was it. What are you talking about? Unique teleports. Oh, the teleports were cool, but again, once. That's it. Mount Mogs. I mean, those things were you do them once and that's it. Do you really want just one time to push over a 10? I don't think that's good either. Offer incentives to push high keys. Yes, doing a weekly 10 is one thing, but having things to chase for like unique teleports. The teleports would be really cool. But again, it's a one-time incentive. It's not going to change the way anybody does dungeons. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why we're suggesting this. There is still no way outside of using a third-party tool to track effectively who did what key and what level and time. Yeah, let's make that first party. I'm done. I think I'm done with Raider.io, man. I really do. I think it's time to move on for that. Explosive needs to go or needs another look at, as it's just not an enjoyable fix. That's your opinion. I disagree. This guy seems to agree with it. This so much. Explosive literally shows you how bad the UI is, and the affix is literally about wrestling with the UI. Is it? Maybe it's your UI that's bad. Mine is actually quite good, and there's multiple weak auras and different elements of, especially Plater, that make it a lot easier to deal with. But maybe that does show just how bad the stock UI is. It isn't fun. Disagree. I actually really like Explosive. I just do my required 1x dungeon Explosive and be done for the week. That's a shame. I would rather speak to the entire system of Mythic Plus's expansion instead of going over the individual changes. Mythic Plus's expansion has been incredibly painful compared to last expansion, and after much thought, I believe I've isolated a few reasons why. I bet you have. Starting, Fortified Tyrannical at level 2 instead of 10 adds a significant amount of difficulty to the dungeon, meaning that there isn't really a super easy mode for new players to get their feet wet in. I'm telling you right now, if you're saying that this makes 2 too difficult, we're done. It's the end of the conversation, okay? You do say this. Even a 3 fortified Motherlode has enough damage to easily overwhelm a new player. Listen, if you're having trouble with 3s, we're done. That's it. That's everything, okay? It's a wrap. Artifact power rewards are extremely poor for the time invested. This I agree with wholeheartedly. Last expansion, this wasn't as bad, since the artifact power scaled significantly faster with key levels. Do we have any evidence of that? I don't know if that's true. I don't know, honestly. I think people just remember the fact that in the very beginning of the dungeon, they all give the same amount of AP. So that meant doing the really short dungeons was significantly better AP. This expansion, due to starting Fortified and Tyrannical at 2 instead of 10, is significantly harder to push keys and voiceless pugs. No, it's not. I'm telling you, I don't even want to say anything here. Please, if you're having trouble with 2s or 3s, just come to my channel. I'll help you, okay? I don't know what to tell you. If you're having trouble with 2s or 3s, I will help you. That's all there is to it. I don't know how you could possibly even make this comment. Again, and we talked about this in the last video. I don't think this is actually true. I'm pretty sure it just means that it's the same as it was in the day when Tyrannical was there, and it's the same as it was in the day when Fortified is there. The other side is just easier. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I'm pretty sure when they changed the scaling, they just made it so the Fortified scaling scales higher on certain weeks, and the Tyrannical scaling scales higher on certain weeks. It should not affect the overall difficulty of the dungeon, because the trash is easier and the bosses are harder, whereas in Legion, they were both equal. I don't think that's true. So if you guys know more, nobody replied to it in the last comment either, but Raider.io elitism isn't really a problem with the website itself, but more of an expression of frustration with how difficult some of the mid-tier keys are these days. In Legion, it was significantly easier to pug keys because the dungeons themselves were more forgiving, and you didn't have an additional affix at 2. Again, please stop bringing this up. It's not an affix. Oh my god. Now, once you hit a 10 in a pug, if you don't have a group working together, your Gahoon spawns can easily snowball, causing many groups to wipe. If you say so. This has caused a lot of elitism around Raider.io scores, making it very hard for the once per week folks to get their keys done. You can just do your own key. Again, this is trust me, dude. You don't have to convince me that Raider.io is causing problems, and the elitism is the right word for it. But this is not. I just don't know, man. It's really weird. Sometimes you got these people who are casuals saying the game's too hard, and sometimes you got these people who are hardcore saying the game's too hard. It's like what? It's a game. It's supposed to be hard. I don't know what to tell you. Just get better. Due to the difficulty of the dungeons and lack of rewards, people want to ensure they have a very overkill group for the content that doesn't actually give that good a gear. That is definitely the case, and it is definitely not Blizzard's problem. That is the problem of the social elements of the game. It's never going to go away. Since the dungeons can't reward Azerite armor either, looting during the week, not the weekly chest, there's very little incentive to do Mythic Plus more frequently than once per week. I disagree. Anyway, my suggestions. Double AP gain across the board and introduce additional rewards at 10, 15, 20, such as Expulsum, raid materials, and gold. More like stuff dropping in the box, I don't think is going to encourage people. I really don't. But anyway, I definitely agree. Again, definitely agree. More AP for Mythic Plus. Let's make that happen. Change Fortified Tyrannical to level 10 or reduce the base power but increase their scaling, such as the fortified trash is 5% stronger but gains an additional 2% damage. So you're basically asking them to make dungeons easier. That won't be happening. Allow Azerite gear to drop at an appropriate level from the end of dungeon chests. The gear system is so nearly punitive that it's driving folks from the game. I mean, how could people say this about Azerite gear, man? How could you say this after Legion? Did you play Legion? Do you know how hard it was to get the right legendaries in Legion, man? It's just sad. It really is sad. It really is sad. You get so much gear from Mythic Plus, and people still complain about it, man. You are allowed to get gear from something. Just do the goddamn game. Just play the goddamn game, man. That is just despicable. I really have no respect for that. Anyway, Fortified Affix should never be combined with teaming. I disagree. Fortified and Tyrannical Affixes are very imbalanced. Fortified slows you down so much more compared to Tyrannical. Yeah, that's true. And that's, the trash is definitely a lot more time consuming. But the difference is you should never really wipe to trash. Bosses, you're going to wipe, you're going to die, you're going to come back, you have to fight the boss again. Trash, you're going to kill some things. You're going to come back, it's going to be slightly easier. So it doesn't really have the same difficulty, but it definitely slows you down. Some bosses on Tyrannical are much harder than others. For example, in Toldagor, last boss, yeah, you're right. The difference in bosses on Tyrannical is definitely noticeable. AP reward from the end of dungeon chest is too low. I'm glad so many people agree with this. It's actually nice to see this. It should also drop some gold to compensate. Yeah, that would be cool. Actually, gold from the chest would be nice too. That is the one thing that really sucks about Mythic Plus. That you have to use so many. You have to spend so much money to be able to do Mythic Plus. Trash mobs do too much casts. You have to interrupt or otherwise deal with. Trash mobs, I mean, this is just not relevant. You could stun, knockback, all of these things. Bosses are a different story, though. Overall, I think something needs to be done to make Mythic Plus more pug-friendly. I don't know. I guess it's just me. I'm the only one who actually enjoys pugging Mythic Plus, it feels like sometimes. But, I mean, those groups without voice communication are getting punished for not using it. Are they? I'm having no problem. Anyway, never-ending bugs like mobs pulling through the floor, walls, and Toldagor and Waycrest. Yeah, this is obviously, they don't want this, okay? I don't think they're ever satisfied seeing this. 100 pets getting stuck on the last boss in Siege of Borealis. This I've heard twice now, and I don't know anything about it, but if that happens, I sympathize. Not Mythic Plus, but also related give hunters back battle res. I didn't know they didn't have it, so that sucks. I recommend something. Okay, I don't want to keep reading these replies. It's going to take all day. Mind checking on adding another 5 minutes to the timer for King's Rest. In higher keys, one wipe or slow pull, and it's basically over. Yeah, I think they could do with this, to be honest. That dungeon is really compact, and if you do make a single, especially since the res is all the way at the start, right? I think that's just the worst dungeon right now in terms of the timer. So I could not 5 minutes though, maybe 2.5. But yeah, they should add more time to it. Also in Toldagor, Bobby Hollis runs off and casts and just to go back to that, the reason they should add more timer to it is because it's a dungeon that people fear, okay? And if you added more timer to it, people wouldn't fear it as much. That's it. Just change the perception of the dungeon. There's nothing really wrong with the dungeon. It's a little too difficult and designed oddly, but just change the perception of the dungeon. Make it easier to upgrade, and even if you wipe a bunch, then maybe you still have a chance. Anyway, Bobby Hollis runs off and casts Fear. Personally, I don't like how he runs off and casts something that fears the whole party. When does that happen? I don't think he casts the Fear until he's standing still, right? But I don't know. And tentacles in the final boss of Siege of Borealis feel like they spawn too quickly, making the fight extremely unfriendly to melee. Maybe slow down their spawns by 2 or 4 seconds. The thing is, the spawns are the DPS check. Otherwise, you would just kill the main, you would just crush the fight. It would be a 30-second fight. If everybody can just attack one thing and never have to switch targets, that fight's a joke, right? So no, that's not a good idea. Overall, the majority of the dungeons, it feels like if you make one mistake, you can't recover without pulling a rabbit out of a hat. That's because you're doing keys that you're probably not supposed to be doing. If you're making one mistake and failing to upgrade the key, you're probably under-geared or you're probably overachieving, trying to be overachieving, okay? That's all there is to it. If you're doing 12s, 13s, 14s, you can make a couple mistakes. I've upgraded plenty of keys with, 12, 15 deaths. It's not that bad. You just have to have high DPS and make good pulls. It's extremely punishing compared to how Legion was, where the timer was forgiving and had leeway for mistakes or slow pulled. Now, this is funny, right? Because I think it's the complete opposite. I think in Legion, the timer, other than the only one that I felt differently on, the only timer that I felt differently was Halls of Valor. And Halls of Valor was just a block some weeks because you couldn't get past Herja. But you can wipe a couple times in Halls of Valor and still have a real chance of completing that. In fact, I had that many times. Many times we'd wipe 2 or 3 times the boss and we still complete the timer. Every other dungeon was not this way at all. In my recollection, I don't have the clearest memory, but I think my memory is at least as good as Rycolette, okay? And I think it's definitely at least equally, I've wiped many times in BFA dungeons and upgraded them. But I haven't done that on 18s and shit higher than that, right? So you're just doing keys that are hard. They're supposed to be hard. So anyway, overall, we read this. Too much go in this expansion's Mythic Plus, in my opinion. That's the point of the system, man. It's the same way in Legion. Just isn't fun to do and feels more like a chore. All right, then you don't like the system. I don't have to tell you. Biggest problem with Mythic Plus this expansion is how claustrophobic all the dungeons feel in BFA compared to Legion. It's like there's no room at all to do anything, or else you'll pull 16 other nearby mobs. That definitely does feel that way. I 100% agree, and I think that's what they want. But it's definitely not wrong to say that is I wouldn't call it a problem. It's the biggest change with Mythic Plus this expansion. How claustrophobic they all feel. Ythisens, can you add Siege to this list? Fic Goth on High Tyrannical just takes way too long simply from having way too much health on the tentacles. Yeah, okay, so I've heard a couple of people bring this up now. Maybe on High Tyrannical the tentacles take too long. I could understand that. So my biggest concern personally is the discrepancy between poisons, diseases, curses in the dungeons that were designed for BFA. While they've been originally designed around their thematic differences, from a balance standpoint, they are pretty awful. The majority of the curses can be ignored or are punishing to dispel quickly, in the case of Hex and Natal Dazar, while poisons and disease are absolutely devastating when you don't have a dispel for them. I think this is one of the factors that is causing Shaman healer issues in Mythic Plus that could easily be alleviated by the dev team. There's always going to be a meta, my friend, and I don't think Shaman's biggest... I don't think they're being held back by what type of thing they can dispel, but... I understand the point. In Legion, there was a lot less things to dispel, I believe, right? Would you guys agree with that? I feel like that was the case. I feel like in Legion, there was a lot less things to dispel, so maybe that is true. But I don't know. All right. Thanks for making this post here. I've ran a lot. This is a long one, isn't it? Oh, boy. Anyway, I've ran a lot of 10s or higher since 8.1, and I want to share my opinion, mostly about dungeons that requires your look here. Okay, Shrine of the Storm is one dungeon that we only want to run in specific weeks because it is unforgiving, hard to play around, and some specific classes are encouraged for this. Despite all changes from 8.1, this is needed to have a look from the devs. I'm not going to read all this, sorry. I'm sure you have some good points. They'll read this if they feel like that's the case. King's Rest, the hardest Mythic Plus dungeon I've ever played in the history. Despite the nerf in 8.1, there's some major problems that are held the key from being pushed. Yeah, I'm sure these are good points, but I just don't. This is a lot. But yeah, anyway, I definitely agree. King's Rest and Shrine of the Storm are the hardest two dungeons in the game. So maybe they can make them slightly easier, not to make Mythic Plus overall easier, but just because they are out of whack with the other ones. This guy seconds this. Good. I'm not going to read these replies. Here's this guy again. I feel some mobs really need arrows to see where they are firing shots, similar to the archers, and healer challenge from Legion. That would be nice. Some type of directional thing. Because it's actually difficult to see them when they're all like kind of clumped up on top of each other. You can't tell where they're facing. Feedback inquiries are welcome, of course, but I worry when devs can't figure out on their own why a clearly not fun game mode is not fun. And this is coming from someone who cleared 15s in Legion. That's not very impressive, my friend. Let me turn this around on you for a second. Ythisens, what do you personally think was wrong in Mythic Plus dungeons at the start of BFA? How far did you progress both before and after the change? Ythisens is actually a pretty competitive player, by the way. And do you think the changes fixed all of your concerns? Considering he's playing a rep pally, I think he's actually pretty accomplished. Knowing whether or not CM's dev think BFA was a good expansion at launch and in its current state will go a long way towards determining my future Blizzard purchase decisions. Eat a fucking dick, dude. Get the fuck out of here. I can't even be asked reading this nonsense. If tab targeting could be adjusted specifically for a fix, exploding or whatever the orbs, it would go a long way to helping. Okay, I'm not reading this. Yeah, I agree. Explosives targeting can be difficult, but you got to click on them. I'd love to see a set rotation for the council bosses in King's Rest. This would actually be nice. This is something that I would second. I would bring up as well. These like random rotations in Waycrest as well. I think we need this to be the same way every week. And I don't know why they don't do that. I really don't. It seems very odd. Talking about this, especially in the MDI, right? Because they have to do it in the MDI. This is I actually talked to Ythisens about this personally. In the MDI, they had to change Waycrest so it would be the same every time they did it. It's like if you're doing this for the MDI, then why is this not done for the regular game? Talking about the system as a whole, have you guys considered giving us something to do with the materials we get from the chest? I've stocked up hundreds of Hydrocore, and I imagine I will have hundreds of the new material once the new season launches. Can we get some vendor that sells Mythic Plus only in Vispots? That would be amazing. If there was something you could actually use these dungeon materials for besides actual crafting, unbelievable. I would love it if they were kind of like the Blood of Sargeras from Legion, where you can buy maybe other materials. That would be amazing. But, oh wait, this guy corrects this person. It just rotates, but same rotation each week. Oh, okay. Well, either way, I was thinking more of a Waycrest Manor when the guy brought it up. So, oh, there's my post. The debuff on King's Rest, the debuff on third boss in King's Rest lasts too long. I see. Okay, so my main complaint here, only complaints with Mythic Plus is how we allow people to leave with no punishment of any sort. If you're new to the channel, welcome. No other content in the game cannot be refilled or restarted, and leavers have become an increasing problem with Raider.io dominating the incentive structure and them refusing to add proper incentives for completing keys alongside upgrading keys. All of the stuff you've seen on the channel already. I'm not sure how to fix this, but I find it really causes problems when you have a key that is particularly hard a certain week especially. My first inclination is to say something that like make it so keys don't downgrade if someone leaves. Not sure if that's even possible to do, but either way, it's quite frustrating to get halfway through a dungeon, have someone leave, then have to do the exact same dungeon on a level lower. Maybe the better option is to allow for some sort of reroll feature for keys, just like I was talking about. I'd much rather there be some protection for leavers for my Keystone, because at this point it feels like doing my own key is basically pointless depending on which key I get. So this guy, he also would like to see upgrade, downgrade, reroll keys. I'm glad that other people agree. I'm not going to belabor on this because this is my post, and it's basically the same thing I've been talking about on the channel. So my main is a 1700 Rio Mage, and I play 4 of their classes about 1k score, so I'm obviously not insane, but I don't think I can be considered terrible. That's nice. First thing I noticed about these dungeons, they take way more coordination to run smoothly. That's true. This is both a good thing and a bad thing. Glad we agree. It's good if you have a setup group, but bad if you like to pug. I disagree. I think that's a good thing about pugging. I personally mostly run with guildies, so I like that the dungeons are harder and require more coordination. On a side note, most of these new requirements for comms should just come from the Gahuna fix, which I think is something which I think is awful and just not plain. Yeah, obviously I agree. Gahoon was kind of unfortunate, and it's gone in a couple days, so don't worry. Once it's gone, I think it should be, yeah, I agree. Reaping is going to be a lot more fun to deal with as well. The other main issue I have is just imbalance of the affixes. I prefer the lesser affixes, Volcanic, Tyrannical, plus Teeming and Raging, to be brought up in difficulty, and the hardest affixes, Necrotic, Bolstering, Fort, Teeming, to be brought down. It just feels like there's too much of a gap between the difficulty of the different combos. Well, that's actually something they have been working on, right? Bolstering is just not fun. I actually love Bolstering because it means you don't have to pull a bunch of nonsense. But non-elites shouldn't bolster elites. Yeah, I could agree. These pack types of mini-bosses surrounded by small adds happen way too often. The 2 big dungeons for this are Siege and Shrine, but there's plenty of examples all over the place. I definitely agree. I think that's the biggest problem. Sanguine is the same, but not as bad. I think there should be a cap on Sanguine. Once it heals enough, the puddle depletes. It would be cool. That would actually be really neat. I definitely agree. Explosive is a fun mechanic, I feel. It's just random. A lot of people get rid of it, but I feel it's challenging and requires coordination. I really love Explosive. Explosive is probably my favorite fix to do as a tank because I could switch them and one-shot them. You know, it's awesome. Teaming should be a third affix to go along with Fort and Tyrannical. Ironically, that's how they did it in the MDI. Fort is just overtuned compared to Tyrannical, but Tyrannical is less fun IMO because it's very stressful during a 3 to 4 minute dungeon boss where one mistake can wipe a whole group and scuff the key. Tyrannical is probably fine at the end of the day. Fort needs some obvious tuning. Obviously needs some tuning IMO. I don't know, man. I think Fortified is actually it could be nerfed slightly. Maybe a very slight nerf, but the only thing I can mention is how poor I think class balance has been. I disagree. Having a rogue with Shroud can be good. Frost Mage but roots on Gahoon. None elites who run is very important. As well as slows. With this utility, rogues and mages are also top on damage, and I feel like it creates somewhat of a monopoly on classes. It's weird to hear people say mages like the best class. It's odd. At the end of the day, most of the classes are viable other than Enhanced, Feral, Shadow Priest. I'm glad we agree there. And you can make it work. It's just much harder without Battle Res, Rogue, Shroud, and Mage Control. I don't know about Mage Control, honestly, man. I think you're overvaluing that. But yeah, Rogue is definitely a massive outlier. So forgot to mention one thing. 2 dungeons, Temple and King's Rest. We can't avoid going over the trash requirements of the key without using Invis Pots or Rogue Shroud. That's the biggest problem with King's Rest for sure. I think it's poor design. I agree. All right, so I replied to him. The dungeon I would like to see touch on are King's Rest, Shrine, and Waycrest. The fixes I think need touched up still is Sanguine, Teeming, specifically Fortified, and Explosive. Personally, I think the amount of kicks required for Shrine is significantly too high, basically pigeonholes certain comps on higher keys or else it isn't completable. That's really silly to say that. The interrupt is not that. It's not that required. It's definitely good to interrupt as often as you can, but it's not like ranged casters and shit just don't have interrupts. They do. If you bring 3 bombkins, you're probably fucked. You know what I mean? That's your problem. I don't know. The final boss's HP is also a bit high. Okay, they changed that. I think the percentage required on Waycrest is also about 5% too high. You basically always have to go out of your way to pull extra to get to proper percentage, which seems weird compared to every other dungeon. That is actually a great point. I think you're right. I think Waycrest should be nerfed by about 5%. King's Rest also feels like it just needs a longer timer. We've talked about that. Completely agree. My only complaint with Affixes as a whole is Explosive still seems way harder than other Affixes. Disagree. I think Explosive is actually really easy. The problem with Explosive is that you waste so much damage on it. That is the problem. I don't know why people don't bring this up. It's like people hate switching to them, but the reason you should hate switching to them is because you're wasting so much damage doing it. That is the problem with it. You know what I mean? So, oh shit, did this actually get more attention after he posted it? Nope, still only has 47 comments. Oh man, this is one of the guys, I guess, who knows that that post the last video we made. As a whole, this expansion trash is much more tedious than in Legion. Last expansion, 1 player's cooldowns was all it took to mow a single pack down, and this expansion, every pull takes 30 to 40 seconds. This problem is only amplified on Fortified weeks, which adds an absolutely absurd amount of overall required damage for a dungeon, especially when compared with Tyrannical. See, I guess I'll have to take your guys' word for it. These guys are doing serious shit. I guess I'll have to take your word for it, but I'm surprised. I don't think this is the case. I really don't. I think people are exaggerating. In addition to, I guess it'd be easy to compare, though. You can just run the same key 2 different weeks with Tyrannical and Fortified and see how much more damage is needed. But anyway, I would love to see game-wide trash health, melee damage, and spell damage nerfs no matter how small. Mini-bosses in particular in dungeons just wait. Yeah, that is one thing I will definitely agree with. Mini-bosses, especially in Shrine, a prime example of how they're out of whack. I completely agree. Player power is an important factor behind player enjoyment in World of Warcraft, whether that be in the form of damage output or the ability to handle damage input. There's been a lot of talk recently about community perception of classes this expansion, and when player power as a whole feels significantly weaker than the last expansion in dungeons, it becomes a lot easier to fixate on the negatives as opposed to looking towards the positives. I'm glad that we agree on that. There are any numbers of tuning knobs that can be played with to adjust throughputs for various classes and specs, but the hardest knob to tune that has massive impacts would be a utility. Yes, definitely agree. Utility has that some classes and specs bring our core part of. It's funny how it took like a year for people to start realizing this, right? Do you remember in Legion? Do you remember when I was making the tier list in Legion, and people are like, "Lol, Warrior's the best. They're just the best. They do the most damage." It's like, well, damage isn't the only thing they bring, right? You gotta have utility. No, they're the best. It's like, dude, how's it taking people so long to realize that utility is actually like the best thing about 5-mans? Some unique utility is significantly more powerful when you look at it alongside the rest of the toolkits for those classes provide dungeons, be it through their damage or healing. Yep, I obviously agree. Then he's going to list things. Shroud, Force of Nature, both Bombkin and Ellie have that, though, and Resto, too. Gorfine's Grass, this is something that's also shared with a couple other options. It's not exactly like Gorfine's Grass, but you could do the same thing as a Resto and Guardian Druid. You could do the same thing as Demon Hunter Tank. So yeah, these things are very unique, though. He's right. Shroud of Concealment is definitely the number one. I'm glad he listed it first. The Bombkin Trents and Rock Ellie are very unique as well, but they have some overlap. And things like knockbacks, Gorfine's Grasps, especially, these corralling abilities, these things are very unique as well. So I don't know with all this, but I'm sure he's got some good points. I could go on and on here about the worst affixes to deal with and why I dislike playing into them, but instead I'll leave this short and sweet. There's no week of Mythic Plus affixes that I get excited about logging into to experience in any given dungeon. There are only affixes that I either dread going into or that ones that absolutely do nothing to change how you do the dungeons that I don't even notice at all. I don't know. See, this is a kind of a weird comment, right? It's like if you're doing Mythic Plus this often and you're saying I don't get excited about logging into it. It's like, is that really something that you expect? If you're doing like thousands of Mythic Plus a season, is it something that you're like, I can't wait to log on? It's just you just like it. You know what I mean? You don't have to love it. You don't have to like wake up, be excited about it. It doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. I would love to see more timer tweaks and trash and bosses unchanged, or trash and boss tweaks and timers left unchanged. This is something that needs to be looked at and addressed by dungeon, especially if the Keystone acquisition system stays as it is. This is actually, I'm really glad he put this out. I wish that this just was not the case. I think they need to change how Keystone acquisition and what would you call it? which keystones you have at the right times. That needs to change, if you ask me. The final note I would like to leave is please, please, please do not overtune the 8.2 Mega Dungeon in such a way that it needs multiple massive targeted nerfs. Well, so that won't actually happen for a long time, right? That's a good point, though. That Mega Dungeon coming out is eventually going to be turned into a Mythic Plus dungeon, presumably 8.25, but maybe not until 8.3. Who knows? We don't know. But it's definitely going to happen eventually, right? And when it does, if it's significantly harder, Seat of the Trumpet. What the hell? If it's significantly harder than the other ones, it's going to be the same problem. So I don't know. We'll see. That's so far away. I'm not worried about that. Would have thought watching the Mythic World Champs and every tank being a Blood DK would have told you enough data. Nope. That's how the game works, my friend. Okay, let's read this one. Affixes. Explosive removed. Not fun to play. Disagree. Bolstering. Non-elites and elites should not bolster each other. I agree, but doesn't that kind of already happen? I kind of think that already happens, doesn't it? Maybe elites bolstering non-elites is a problem, but don't non-elites not bolster elites? I don't know. Sanguine puddles made smaller and heal for less. I would say made smaller for sure. Heal for less. You know, if they heal for less, then what's the point of moving out of it? Quacking damage only procs in combat and damage to tanks lowered. Damage to tanks is actually a good point because it's percent based. That's a lot of damage. Quacking in combat, I could, I understand why you'd say that, but I would rather if it just didn't, if it still did damage but didn't interrupt stuff out of combat. Dungeons. Shrine last boss, it's already been nerfed. Shrine mini bosses, HP need to be nerfed. Agreed. King's Rest first boss spit go. Didn't they nerf this? Like, come on. When I was doing King's Rest a couple weeks ago, people were like, oh, the boss is a joke now. Is this not the case? I could have swore they nerfed this, but so many people said they didn't, so I don't know. Third boss, axe debuff needs to be shorter. Third boss is a joke in general. That boss needs to be blown up. They need to change how that boss works. Zul's damage needs to be nerfed. I think his health needs to be nerfed. I think the damage is good. I think he's a little too healthy. King's Rest needs additional time or maybe add 3 minutes to it. Yeah, 3 is somebody suggested 5 before. I like 3 a lot better. AP rewards need to be buffed. Yo, I'm really glad to see very similar feedback. This is good. I was really worried about what I was going to see in this thread. These are really good. A lot of these are I really agree. AP reward needs to be buffed. Classes. Utility between classes needs to be revised. Currently, Demon Hunter and Rogues have no reason to ever be replaced. They have no weaknesses. They do have no weaknesses, not because of utility, though. It's because their bulk, their survival, and then, of course, their mobility. These things are why they're so strong. Their utility is good. Rogues' utility is actually not that good. It just only has one thing, really. Sap almost, it almost never gets used. It does get used, but Shroud of Concealment is just so valuable. That's the problem. They have very little utility outside of Shroud of Concealment, but they have the best utility. Demon Hunter doesn't really have any utility either. They have an AoE stun and darkness, which is like hit or miss. It's not the best thing in the game. You know what I mean? That's it. But it's their bulk. It's how much damage they can put out. It's how mobile and flexible they are. That's the reason those specs are so strong, not because of utility. Both do amazing single target and AoE, and they have the best utility. And I don't agree. I don't know how anybody could say Demon Hunter is the best utility in the game. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, Bombkin, Ellie Shaman. These things have the best utility in the game. Maybe even Mage. Why would you ever pick a Warrior instead of one of those? That's a great question. That's a problem with Warrior, though. That is a problem with Warrior, not a problem with those 2 specs. Anyway. Hey, Blizzard, I just want to say I have a decent amount of fun with Mythic Plus, but there are quite a few things that need to address. Shrine, last boss, you took out the ability. Okay, it's been nerfed. Waycrest, the biggest issue with the difficulty discrepancy among the routes you get in this dungeon. 100% agree. I don't think I need to read the rest of this. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. Freehold, Eudora, the first boss needs some kind of damage reduction on Tyrannical. It is. It's the highest scaling boss in terms of damage in the game. You already get, the problem is, they kind of get, it's meant to be a hard fight naturally because you get all these buffs while you're fighting it, right? No matter what week it is, you get some kind of benefit while you're fighting the boss. People don't use it well. They don't use it well. That's the problem. So I think they should just take those buffs out and make the bosses have less health or do less damage. King's Rest, last boss, the combo cleave last boss does for me as a Blood DK is absolutely insane. I'm glad to see other Blood DKs say this. Saving 90 RP in preparation for slash that hits 4 times just decimates me. I found that when I parry at least 2 of the 4 slashes, the boss is doable, but relying on parry is not exactly fun gameplay. You are a tank, right? Berserker. Yeah, so either way, that is a good point. The boss is hard, but it's a Blood DK problem. It's not a boss problem. Boss is actually really easy as other tanks. We just don't have very good active mitigation. We have to heal, and it's very difficult, like you said. My tip is not just say runic power, but also make sure you have at least 4 or 5 stacks of hemostasis going into the first one. You get a first one, that first one, maybe the second one, you death strike the second one, and then you're gonna have a nice death or blood shield for the third and fourth one, maybe. You know what I mean? So that's the way to do it. But anyway, I think that's just playing better. Berserker adds the bleed damage, might need another 10% nerf. I think the internal cooldown between them stacking the debuff should also be addressed. That is what I think should be addressed. No more nerfs. No more nerfs. Stop making these mobs any easier. They're meant to be hard. But definitely the internal cooldown's very inconsistent. Plenty of double Berserker packs and King's Rest teaming. Just stacking the debuff on tank unless he kites. The tank is kiting, it just tightens the timer, right? I agree. Shouldn't be able to apply the debuff as often as they can sometimes. The difficulty discrepancy between Alliance and Horde, yeah. This is something that was brought up in the previous video. I didn't know anything about this, and I agree. It is very laughable. I don't know how they did this. It makes no fucking sense. Who thought this was a good idea, to make Mythic Plus dungeons have different starts and different mobs? It's weird. It doesn't make any sense. I really do think Blizzard should evaluate some affix weeks, for example. Teaming Fortified Explosive. That's a tough one. Teaming Fortified Quacking. Is that actually a week? Bolstering Explosive Tyrannical. Bolstering Grievous Tyrannical. What's wrong with bolstering Grievous Tyrannical? Anyway, these weeks have easily the lowest Mythic Plus participation. Don't say this. Come on. If you're not going to cite things, I don't know. It makes me not want to keep reading. In fact, I'm just going to move on. King's Rest, the dungeon is still awful on so many affixes. The timer is tight, the trash is abusive, and it's compounded by how many affixes make it even worse. The entire dungeon is awful, and getting a key for it ruins your week as a Mythic Plus player. King's Rest is definitely, I think it should be changed a little bit. Some changes. The timer could stand. This is for Shrine. The timer could stand to be extended by about 3 minutes. So the boss has been nerfed. I guess a lot of people didn't know this. The boss has been nerfed. Okay, I don't think the timer needs to change in Shrine. Siege of Borlus. I don't care really. I just take a spotter and nuke the tentacles on the last boss. Everything else in this place seems pretty easy as a DPS. I see. Are you gonna actually do one for every single dungeon? Oh boy. Atal Dazar could stand a very slight HP nerf for Yasma Tyrannical weeks. Yep, I agree. Freehold, the shark boss is no longer AIDS, but apparently half the population can no longer do the second boss well. It wouldn't change anything in here, though. The dungeon has a forgiving timer and it's pretty well tuned. Agreed. I think Freehold is the best dungeon for design overall. Waycrest Manor, tried significantly easier in here. Are they? The only thing this dungeon really suffers from is certain affixes that will never be balanced in here. This used to be offset by key deletion. No, it didn't. This used to be abused by key deletion, but this now this place feels like cancer. Really, Waycrest is like not that bad. The Waycrest on maybe on Teaming and definitely on Sanguine I don't like, but otherwise it's fine. Temple Cethralis, I ran lower keys. Last boss is much better. Since the fix of the first boss, yeah, this dungeon is actually a lot better. A lot better. Underrot never had an issue with this place aside from the first boss. This was fixed, but the matrons were given true sight. This seems like a poorly thought out change. Completely disagree. Those ads were skipped for a reason. Yeah, they were skipped, and then when you fail to skip, the dungeon ends. How about we not encourage that, all right? To touch on other aspects of Mythic Plus, though, Tyrannical First Fortified, the affixes are severely out of balance with how dangerous trash can be in BFA. Again, I really don't know why people keep saying that there's so much more trash. The percentages of Fortified really should be brought in line with Tyrannical so we can all enjoy Mythic Plus every week instead of half the scene dropping out on the fourth affix. Finding groups is a chore on Fort Week, and then chesting is a whole other story. A group of DPS average 17 to 20k overall shouldn't be pushing a timer close in a 14 key because the trash is so absurdly overtuned. One way or the other, I'm glad that this is being said so vocally because I really hope that these types of comments will help the people who make and develop the Raider.io Keystone system or a scoring system to understand that all weeks are not created equal. I really hope that these kind of conversations are going to help with this. And maybe they nerf Fortified and maybe they change groups or dungeons or whatever. A group of DPS average 17 to 20k overall shouldn't be pushing a timer close in 14. You got to compare that. Like if you're doing 20k overall, where is that on Tyrannical? Don't forget, you're doing 20k overall because you're fighting trash longer. That means more targets to take more damage. I just don't know if it's equatable. I don't know. I'm not a genius when it comes to that stuff, though. Lastly, key deletion. I didn't play Legion, so I don't know how it was then. Oh, I'll tell you, it didn't fucking exist. But I do know how it was when I got into Mythic Plus and BFA. Not being able to re-roll your key feels awful. That is the intended goal of the system currently. I wish it was different, but deleting your key is definitely not the choice. So anyway, Slatty. Why not three items in your loot? Azerite item, weapon, and random armor. Oh, no. I thought they were going to suggest 3 items and then choose one. I mean, it's what the majority of the community thought was coming in the first place. I don't think anybody thought you were going to get a weapon, random armor, and a different piece. That's ridiculous. No way. Absolutely not. No, 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 no. We should not be giving out any more gear from Mythic Plus. I mean, with this kind of RNG, yes, you'll also have some guy open his... Yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. You cannot be giving out 380 pieces. It's just not. No, 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 no. I am an average Mythic Plus healer. My perspective comes from that place. Please look at the affixes again. Quacking should not occur out of combat and should be smaller like Volcanic. I'll allow Grievous to drop out of combat like Necrotic or make it... That would actually be a good change. Out of combat, drop the Grievous would be nice. If I had my druthers, I'd delete Grievous and call it a day. Yeah, I bet you would as a healer. When mobs are affected by teaming, please adjust what is added. Some teaming pulls are beyond frustrating. Teaming, I quite like how teaming's worked out. Shrine Bridge, for example, you just skip it. As well, the way some of the bosses interact with the fixes is silly. Grievous and Waycrest is frustrating. Volcanic and the final boss is Underrot is silly, but it makes Volcanic and a fix, so it's silly for a reason. Explosive and the final boss in Temple is frustrating. That one's a weird one. Explosive spawning all over the place in Temple is odd. Please address the meta. That is not Blizzard's problem. When I run with the meta group, I feel like I found a God mode cheat code. For example, give invisibility pots the same CD as Shroud, plus 1 minute and disconnect it from other pots. I agree. Or make Shroud put all pots... Oof. Oof. Could you imagine if they did this? Could you imagine if they made Shroud put... Oh my God. People would riot. Don't even say this. Why would you even say this out loud? Why would you even say this? Please give us a way to re-roll keys. I would like this. I've gotten Shrine and King's Rest so many times it's comical. But the dungeons shouldn't just be like... You know, if you dislike the dungeon, that's one thing. Like, I dislike Toldagor. I don't like doing the dungeon. So if I could avoid doing the dungeon, I would. But it's not that much harder than any other dungeon. In fact, it's probably not harder than any other dungeon. The problem is that these dungeons are just a little out of whack. You know, especially King's Rest. I really feel like people really... Shrine is really not that bad. I don't know. Give us some duplication protection with keys. I have some guildies run my Shrine 10 1 week so I can get a new key. That is the problem. When you get the same key, it really sucks. Got Shrine 9. That sucks. Please thin the trash. No. Because then they're going to have to make the timer. Like, they're going to have to change the timer. I don't know what you guys want, man. You have to understand. The HP that you're dealing with on trash is part of the timer. So if there's 500 mobs or 5 mobs, it's still going to be the same. You're going to be in combat with trash for this percentage of the timer. This is how they work it out. This is exactly how they did it in Legion. You know what I mean? It's not like bosses were like 15 minutes each. You know what I mean? It's not like you spent like 30 minutes on bosses and 10 minutes on trash and Legion. It's the exact same way. You just think it's harder because now these bosses, these mechanics actually happen on trash. There's trash that actually do things. And there's mobs that have way too much health. You know what I mean? There's these lieutenant type mobs that are way too dangerous, and especially on Fortified. The trash does not need to be changed. They just need to reduce the health of these NPCs that are like considered mini bosses. And then you need to get better at using your CDs on trash. That's the end of it. Working through 10 or 12 trash packs to get to the first boss in Motherload is tedious. Looking back, Halls of Valor had a grand total of 3 trash packs. It doesn't matter how many packs it had. It's still the same amount of HP spent on trash, right? You can only skip so much trash, and you're going to pull the same amount of HP per dungeon. You know what I mean? This is the way you need to be looking at it. Don't worry about how many mobs you're fighting. Don't worry about how many pulls you're doing. Combine the pulls if if you think that this is not true, then combine them. You know what I mean? Pull them all together and use all your CDs on trash. That's the way you do it. I don't know, man. Please give every healer the ability to remove poison or stop making places like King's Rest. The trash after the first boss is miserable without the ability to remove poison. Yeah, it's true. Poison is a weird one, this expansion. I don't care how short the duration is. Give me the ability to remove it. Or make the abilities that put the poison out there interruptible. That would probably be the choice. Make it interruptible. Please give every healer the ability to CC and interrupt. It would be interesting. That's the one thing about Shaman, right? They're the only healer that can interrupt. Now, 3 healers could CC, right? Is it 3? Priest can't, so there's 2 there. And Druid can root, technically, but that doesn't really count. So it's just Shaman could Hex, Monk could Paralyze, and Paladin could Repentance. And that's it, right? Line of sight help. Line of sight healing issues occur far too often. We were joking that the bushes in Siege the other night kept me from seeing the tank. Is this really necessary? Is this true? I don't really heal, so maybe it is, but I don't think this is true. I mean, the boss can hit me with their debuff. I'm behind a rock, but let me heal the tank if he's behind the same rock. If you're sure, I don't know about that. Some of the boss fights are pure tedium. The totem boss in the Talazar is beyond frustrating with the movement punishment. I've seen people say this forever. It's like, dude, the boss is designed this way. It's disappointment. It's not tedious. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to move. That's the fight. The first half of the fight, nothing happens. This is a fight. First boss in King's Wrath is melee unfriendly. That's a funny thing to say in BFA. Melee unfriendly. Never heard that word before. The second boss in Shrine is way too comp sensitive. Second boss. Comp sensitive. Why? Because it interrupts? I suppose I can understand that. Quite honestly, the one word I'd use to describe BFA Mythic Plus against Legion is tedious. Well, I don't know. I just don't know what to tell you guys. If you don't enjoy Mythic Plus dungeons, then just don't do them. But please, stop trying to make them easier. Stop trying to make them even easier than they already are. People are already doing like 23s and shit. They can't get any easier. What do you want them to do? If you find something to be tedious, it's because you don't enjoy doing it. They're not going to be able to make you enjoy it. You know what I mean? It's supposed to be a video game. It's supposed to be fun. If you don't find it to be fun, then I don't know what to tell you. Okay? Motherload. On the hill, the last boss of mines give bolster no matter what. If you kill them or if you don't. We used to be able to hit them. Yeah, that is weird. I don't know what's up with bolstering on this. The fact that those mines spawn and do mechanics really is odd. The reason this is an issue is because some of the machines spawn bombs underneath them. Yeah, I agree. That should be changed. I'm sorry, I can't read all this, man. I really can't. I'm sure you have some good points, but this is just way... Oh, this is this guy. Fuck. I should read it, too. Because this is this guy. He's a good guy, but... I'm sure he's got some great points here, so if you guys want to read this, feel free. But it's just a bunch of tuning stuff, it looks like, so... Bobby Hollis no longer casts Vicious Mauling just before or during just Howling Fear cast. I don't know. I think stuff like that is about playing it better. Here, let's read these at least, the affixes. Explosive orb spawn rate changed to be much more relevant on fewer targets and much less punishing on many targets. I think that's kind of how it is. Isn't it kind of that way already? I feel like, but maybe not. The change will reduce the affixes' unintended effect of causing players to pull very, very slowly and will make it much more of a factor on a single target encounter. Oh, I see. I was thinking it the other way around. He's actually saying the opposite of what I was thinking. This is actually a great idea. I agree. It should happen more frequently on bosses than it does. Orbs now spawn about 3 times as much on single target, but at 5 or more targets, they will spawn about half as often. And yeah, I agree. This is actually a great idea. Bolstering is now a 15-second non-dispellable debuff, and instead of increasing health, it reduces damage taken by 20%. That's interesting. Bolstering now occurs 2 seconds after enemy dies rather than immediately. That's not interesting. You're just making the affix very, very easy. Raging is now dispellable by any magic dispel rather than enraged dispels. That'd be cool if Purge worked as well. But again, it's too easy as it is, if you ask me. This change will reduce the need to have a druid or hunter in your party. I mean, that's one option, but it's like it used to not be dispellable, and it was never a problem back then. So, fix the bug with Grievous where it gains a stack earlier than intended, as discussed in this article. Is this really still the case? I guess I don't know what's happening with this. I don't know. I don't know anything about this, but like I said, I soloed with Grievous on the PTR. I had no problem surviving it. So, Grievous damage reduced by 25%. It must be bad for DPS or something. I don't know. Necrotic now stacks 30% slower than it did before. How does that work? It stacks every time you get meleeed. So what? 1 in 3 chance you don't get a stack? Adjusted the teaming spawns in a Talazar to remove the random component. That should definitely happen. I don't know why that's the case. Volcanic radius increased by 20%. That's interesting. Volcanic plume initial damage reduced by 50%, but it now stacks a dot that's actually this is a really good change. This would actually make Volcanic a lot more interesting. The change should increase the difficulty. Yes, that is I'm glad to see him say this. That's good. Added title for having the realm's best run for each dungeon in the style of Mists of Pandaria challenge mode titles. This would be cool, but unfortunately realms just don't, I don't know, at least my realm doesn't matter anymore. Added 2, that'd be cool if maybe region, like there was some kind of region, maybe top 10 in a region or something. Added 2 exclusive transmogs for each you know what? Because think about it, like how people do it in I was actually just watching, it's funny. Pokemon speedrun, you know what I mean? How they put current world record, you know what I mean? Oh, you can't even see it. Anyway, current world record, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. It's just kind of cool to say. It's kind of cool to say I have the best title. So having it per realm is just pointless, right? Because your best for a realm might be like a 40-minute key, you know what I mean? Anyway, added 2 exclusive transmogs for each armor class. One with set unlocked for completing all dungeons on 11, up to 15, and unlocked the same way for completing all dungeons 16 to 20. I'm telling you, man, if you guys, it's really weird to see these like competitive players say that you need transmog in Mythic Plus dungeons. It's just kind of weird. I don't know. Added seasonal titles in the vein of Season Gladiator for players with the best overall sets dungeons. It would be cool at the end of the season, I could see, but I don't know. It's just weird to me. If you guys think Mythic Plus needs cosmetic incentives, I'm wondering why you're doing them. I don't really know. Anyway, 1400 tank here, so I guess I'll offer feedback for the midpoint. Specific dungeons. Fix explosive scaling on last boss, but you didn't fix volcanic. That's true. That's true. I made that mistake earlier as well. I thought they did, but I guess they didn't. I don't know. Volcanic is so easy. It's hard to sit here and think like, oh, they need to change. They need to make volcanic easier. King's Rest, even after all the changes, it's still hard to enjoy. I kind of agree. For the most part, I would say if you're not enjoying something, that's not the game's fault. But King's Rest is a very, very odd dungeon, and this RP trash. It's a very, very odd dungeon. Shadow of Zul, very, very odd dungeon. Most dungeons get easier or harder depending on whether it's tyrannical. King's Rest is a very hard every week. Yeah, I agree. Definitely the hardest dungeon right now. Motherlode has a puzzling spike in trash difficulty after second boss. Every group elects to death skip to the last 2 bosses rather than deal with the trash. I am for clever skips like bears and DHT, but you're skipping half the dungeon right now. Yeah, one way or the other. Like death skips are just a bad idea. I don't like them. And even if people think they're the best option, which is fine for you to do that, I don't think they should be encouraged. So I could see some changes to Motherlode trash. But anyway. You guys buff trash tremendously in BFA, and I personally enjoy it. I wouldn't say they buff trash tremendously. It's just trash actually has mechanics now. It's just like Shrine, right? I'd rather wipe to hard trash than wipe to unavoidable one-shots, definitely. I definitely agree. Because trash, you wipe and you have made some progress, That being said, it feels like you forgot to rebalance trash-specific affixes to account for this new, harder trash. Yeah, I could see that. Specifically explosive bolstering to a lesser degree. Sanguine, much harder than they were in Legion. Sanguine is definitely much harder. Explosive, I wouldn't say. Bolstering is only harder because the trash is a higher volume. That's the problem. In Legion, you play around these affixes. Sanguine was easy to deal with because dungeons had a wide open layout. That's the problem. It's not really Sanguine, it's the dungeons. There are also not nearly as many mixed in white mobs dropping the pools. That's the problem, actually. Way too many non-elites dropping the pools. Yeah, it needs to be a way to re-roll keys. Completely agree. Right now, the only way to re-roll a bad key is to run it. I like running it. Trust me. I don't mind running a key, but it sucks when you run the key and then somebody leaves 10 minutes into the dungeon. That is the problem. So, it's a good post, but I'm sorry the problem is, no offense. Are you willing to listen to what we have to say, or are you simply going to dodge the feedback we give you for so long? That depends. Are you going to give feedback that is actually not in line with what their purpose for the system is? It's not feedback if you want them to change the system to make it more easy or comfortable for you. That is not actually feedback. That is you complaining, effectively. Because all of this is really good feedback and very good insight on what we experience in these dungeons. If you're willing to listen, here's what I have to say on the matter. Tyrannical, disparity between health and damage. There's a total of 55% increased stats, 40% on health, and 15 damage. On Fortified, 30% HP and 20% damage. Just decrease the health on Tyrannical by 5%. So this guy's saying the opposite. See, this is why, listen, this is so ironic. This guy just said the opposite of what other people said. And he's like, are you going to listen to our feedback or what? You just gave feedback that is polar opposite to somebody else. How can they listen to both? I've also seen Galvast Energy Spire's Fork as well. Standing on what? Yeah, this is weird. This boss is like bugged or something. Bug. I think it is bugged. I'm not really sure what's going on there. I was wondering why some places, specifically King's Rest, are so much easier, and now thanks to changes, it would make me want to run teaming weeks more often and not skip them. See how that pans out. But with some changes like the healing buff on the healer, the Whisper of Power, it makes me think on the healer. It makes me think, why not make more of these types of mechanics in each dungeon that allow for non-standard groups to pass the place? That'd be cool. I would like to see more mechanics like that. I know I'm not talking about 5 tanks that done underrot. I mean like Necrotic or Bolstering Week if you don't have a slow, CC or some factors, your group being OP, you found it very hard if you've done it wrong. Necrotic, every tank should be able to kite Necrotic. You don't need a slow. The only bear is really the only one, and they've gotten a lot better now at it. Souls is really nice. So like the healing buff that didn't always go on the healer, but now the problem is with Necrotic is you can't kite half the mobs. That's the problem. So like the healing buff that didn't go on the healer, but now does, which makes that fight a little bit easier. Place buffs that give members something to boost them to help you. Yeah, I like mechanics like this, but I'm not sure why you brought it up twice. I refuse to join some weeks in some dungeons for this exact reason, that you may need specific mechanics. So this is always like this. It was the same way in Legion. There was always going to be weeks that certain keys were going to be harder and easier. The problem is King's Rest when it's hard in both weeks, you know. Shrine, needing interrupts. It is weird you need so many interrupts. Play some mechanics so they can get a reduced CC. That'd be nice, I guess. Knowing is half the battle. Finding the right team to do the mechanics is harder some days than actually doing the content, and a good part of why some teams don't finish the dungeon. I mean, just look at how easy it is to interrupt with all the add-ons, even easier with DBM telling you which one is to specifically interrupt. It's a virtually brain-dead mechanic. But with your only interrupt on CD, yeah, I mean, you should not, like, that's not the case. Everybody should be able to interrupt. I've done about 300 keys so far in BFA, so here are a couple things I would suggest. First off, I think Fortified and Tyrannical are bad affixes in general. They don't add anything to any dungeon other than the boss is impossible on X Tyrannical, or you don't want to do that dungeon on Fortified. In my opinion, these should have been removed and replaced with the seasonal affixes. You know what? I think they're onto something there. I hadn't really thought about it because we're so used to Fortified and Tyrannical, but I think they're onto something there. I hope they'll at least think about just removing those altogether, because you know what? They're kind of right. They don't do anything. It's like, who cares? The dungeon shouldn't change week to week like that. The affixes themselves should be more interesting. That's interesting. I quite like this idea. I quite like this idea of just getting rid of Fortified and Tyrannical. Although I don't know. We'll see. Next thing is the timers. I definitely think Siege and King's Rest need 3 minutes on their timer. Siege of Borealis, maybe. King's Rest, definitely. 3 minutes, I think, is the right number. Siege is pretty much impossible to time on high keys unless you abuse the spotters. King's Rest is a problem if you don't have the perfect group comp to Shroud Death Run to the bridge before the third boss. If we don't use Invis Pots to skip 2 packs on the bridge, you end up with 112% mob count. That's the problem with King's Rest. The design and layout is very odd. Last thing I'll say is there are a few select mobs that need to be looked at. The Berserkers in King's Rest, Enforcers in Freehold, Brute Guards in Atal, and the Trash on the second boss in Motherlode. That's your opinion. I disagree with all that. I'm not going to comment on specific changes, but on one specific issue I have that occurs in multiple dungeons, teleporting the player back to a location while fighting. Yeah, that's not really a Mythic Plus thing, though. I've encountered this issue mostly in Freehold, Atal, and Motherlode. I'm sure this is known and has occurred on many of my friends as well, but less often than I did. Yeah, so we already know all about this. We saw this while we were soloing Atal back on live. But then when I soloed Atal this weekend, it didn't happen, if you guys noticed. I was actually able to pull mobs, and some of them couldn't reach me. Some of them were actually stuck. They couldn't get to me. So I wonder if maybe they changed it at some point. But anyway, I guess if it's still happening, then maybe they didn't. This behavior is new from BFA and has been annoying me a lot. So why they did it was because they don't want people basically forcing mobs to run like 1 billion yards to get to them. But it's really awkward when it happens. It's really weird. The only other thing that I could think of that is more specific to 8.1 patch change could be the last boss in Shrine that has been stated multiple times. I don't even want to go in Shrine during a Tyrannical week with the last boss having too much health and taking forever. Temple changes were good other than that. Yeah, I guess people, by the time they posted this, they hadn't made the change to Shrine yet, so. I must exclusively run Mythic Plus. I love it, but there are definitely some things that are currently ruining the experience for me. I will list all of my feedback that is immediately on the front of my brain, starting with what is probably the least likely to see any change just to get out of the way. Oh, God. A lot of stuff. Much as everyone hates it, I love that Trash is complex at times and requires a lot of kicks. I'm really glad that other people are saying this. It was incredibly frustrating at first, but man, learning those pulls has been one of the most rewarding things. Yeah, it's really rewarding. You're right. Fortified and Tyrannical need to be looked at before anything else. Now that I've heard that other person say that they need to just be removed, I can't unsee that, and I kind of agree. I think they probably should just, why not just make Tyrannical and Fortified both there every week? And make that part of it. Make the dungeons, the Trash and the bosses equally difficult each week. Why do we need 1 week where Trash is easier and bosses are easier? I don't know. When you think about it, it's like, whose idea was that? It's a weird idea. But I'm used to it, so I didn't even think about it until now. Anyway, firstly, Shrine Siege, King's Rest do not have enough time. I could sort of. If they increased the time on these 3 dungeons, I wouldn't be upset. Let's put it that way. As long as it wasn't massively. Heck, I think even the 2 death run the other day, I missed 12 by less than a minute. Also have 15 deaths of Tals and Freeholds that could have easily been timed with minutes to spare. See, that's really the problem, right? It's that these other dungeons just are so generous. Affixes are a mess. Look at the Twitch directory this week. It seems like you don't want people to play Mythic Plus for some weeks. Most of us enjoy the challenge to some degree, but it's nearly unplayable. Don't say shit like that, man. You're making good points and you make some nonsense hyper like, come on, don't say that. The fun is pushing keys, but when you shut down the keys, when you shut down pushing keys, it isn't fun. The thing is, pushing keys changes week to week. Raider.io needs to stop telling you otherwise. Sometimes getting a 14 done is actually quite an accomplishment, okay? So you shouldn't just quit because of that. But you do because you think, oh, well, I did a 17 last week. There's no reason I should be messing around with a 14. Like, this is just, it's the perception of the situation more than it is the content. I'm literally on vacation part of this week, and now I just can't play the game. That's your choice. I had no problem. I don't know what you're talking about, man. The gear needs a rework as well. No way a 10 should reward the same as a 15. I don't agree with this at all. First of all, I don't... Anybody who says anything about changing gear in Mythic Plus dungeons, I'm not going to agree with at all. So, let's just move on. These are really long posts. Over an hour already. We're only halfway through, it seems. Relative to Legion, the first thing I have to say is Mythic Plus is overall much more frustrating. A few thoughts. Tanking Mythic Plus was so much more fun in Legion. Having the ability to keep yourself alive as a tank that isn't a blood DK was fun. That's called being overpowered. That's called an absurd power level, power creep. That's not intended. That was not Mythic Plus related either. Mythic Plus is a lot more, overall a lot more difficult. That's intended. Certain affixes are mind-numbingly frustrating. Disagree. Grievous is undoubtedly the king of frustrating affixes. I don't know why you would say this. I would recommend Sugar-Crusted Fish Feast if you're having trouble with Grievous. Certain dungeons seem unapproachable. Disagree. I don't even want to try Shrine of the Storm. Why not? Well, he probably explains why not, to be fair. But anyway, I just disagree. Okay, man. If you guys, there's certain dungeons that are harder than other dungeons, and that is odd. It really is. But to call it unapproachable, it's like you just don't want to be better. You don't want to improve. Completing Mythic Plus is not just completing Freehold. It's completing all 10 dungeons and doing them well. Having a 15 in every dungeon is a feat. And it was like this in challenge mode too, okay? So these people who are, this is again, you know, a lot of my opinions are based on the fact that I've been running dungeons just this way since Mists of Pandaria. Most people commenting on this, they didn't even know dungeons were in the game until Legion. You know what I mean? They never did a single challenge mode, and if they did, they never improved. They never cared. Now they're trying to improve, and they're frustrated by the fact that they can't improve easily. I learned this shit 7 or 8 years ago, man. You know what I mean? Back in MoP, when MoP came out, I learned all about this stuff. There's some dungeons that are easy. There's some dungeons that are hard. There's some dungeons that are exploitable. There's some dungeons that are linear. That's it. End of story. You can't expect them to make 10 dungeons all be exactly equal. It's not going to happen. They could try, but there's always going to be ones that are easier, and there's always going to be affixes that make ones harder. Okay? So, it was the same way in MoP CMs. You had to complete all 9. There was no, oh, I only do Freehold. I only do Scholomance, the easiest one. That's not how it works, man. To kind of continue this, I feel like certain dungeons are, without a doubt, I got this dungeon, the key is dead dungeon. Yeah, those 2 dungeons are outliers for sure, but it shouldn't be this way. It should just be like, these dungeons are pretty hard. Well, let's give them a try. We'll see what happens. I'd rather speak about the entire Mythic Plus in general, especially when you have 2 to 15 targeting pretty much everyone. And as usual, I'm going to say what I said last time is to remove the timer again and to change the lockout as to how the usual Mythic 0 works so we can invite kick freely. It's not an option. It's just not an option, okay? I'm not sure why you guys are favoring the go players, because you can't have competitive content without a timer. It's not going to work. This isn't a raid, you know what I mean? There's too many ways to cheese 5-mans. You can already see the impatience taking hold with comments like, we're not going to wait 10 minutes for hero debuff, or we don't want to CC pull, and also the rants with certain... Why would you wait 10 minutes for the hero debuff? That means you just lusted and you used it. I'm confused. Anyway, a tool like Rerolling is mostly a discrimination tool with all consequences of how the entire system is made Pug unfriendly. It's Pug unfriendly for reasons, and Raider.io is one of them, but I don't really agree with anything else here. That's not an option, guys. If you think they can remove the timer and things can just work, like with this in mind, it's not possible. They can't. They're not competitive with this. It doesn't make that way. It doesn't make it that way. I tried to get into Mythic Plus mainly as a tank on my Death Knight. Good choice. For me, it's simple. The trash is ridiculous. As a Death Knight, you shouldn't have any problem with trash, my friend. Come, stop by the channel. Andrew Munn. Bad enough to learn all the bosses, but to memorize tons of trash pulls. I just don't have enough time to learn enough to get past low keys. Well, stop by the channel, man. I'd be happy to help. All right, we're not reading replies. After reading all the posts up to this point and taking into account my own experience, I think the easiest and best way to help Mythic Plus is to start with the Tyrannical Fortified tier. It changes the balancing of fixes, encounters, and trash, and not for the better as a whole, as the encounter timer is To kill on their off weeks seem to be about right for both trash and bosses with the week. They are creating such frustrating and non-enjoyable long encounters. I don't know what keys you're doing, but I've yet to run into any frustrating and not enjoyable long encounters. Maybe that happens above like 16 and stuff, but I don't know. I do think Tyrannical and Fortified are, now that I've seen that, I can't unsee it, so I don't know what to say. Proposed what if Tyrannical and Fortified only did the damage or health component, not both? That would be interesting, actually. Yeah, if they made it only damage. That would be interesting, because that does feel like the health thing is odd. I just don't know why they have to be like that. You know, why like 1 week trash is harder and why 1 week boss is harder. It's kind of weird. It's almost like if they thought it was a good idea, and now they're just like, well, we're stuck with it. Also want a way to reroll keys, definitely. I'm glad others agree with that. This guy, Fortified Tyrannical at +2 really discourages inexperienced players. No, it doesn't. You're just really bad at the game. I also don't like the idea of seasonal fixes. Just remove it and use what worked in Legion. Disagree. Seasonal fix is probably like the best thing. This guy actually says, I like the seasonal fix. I really do. It adds something that can make or break you depending. I think the seasonal fix is the best change in the game. I can think of some more later. This is literally just off the top of my head. As mentioned, the health in some bosses is too extreme. Yeah, you know, Shrine was already changed. I guess Siege of Bralis keeps getting brought up. I don't know. Ataldazar, again, not actually high health. It's just the mobs come so frequently. At a certain level, the health of Vigoth on Siege is just way too punishing. I've seen a lot of people say that, so it must be true. The class balance is still pretty out there. Demon Hunter and Rogue are too far ahead in the meta. As an arms warrior, it's frustrating to me. You have to understand the meta is about perception as much as it is balance. These two classes are extremely strong, that's for sure. But they're not that good. They're really not. Like, Rogue bringing stealth is extremely valuable, and that is extremely, like, that's always going to be needed. But, like, Demon Hunter is just an all-around pick. They don't bring anything really specific, you know what I mean? And honestly, I feel like Ret is like, it's almost mirroring Demon Hunter. Ret, Windwalker, these things are doing as much damage. They have as much access to the damage as Demon Hunter does. They have almost as much bulk as the Demon Hunter. Not quite as much, but almost as much. Ret, I think, might actually have as much. And really, their utility isn't that different. You know, think about what does Demon Hunter have that Windwalker doesn't? Just darkness. Windwalker actually brings better utility, if you ask me, though, because darkness is mediocre compared to Ring of Peace. I'd rather have Ring of Peace, AoE Stun, and Paralyze than Demon Hunter's utility, that's for sure. And Ret Paladin's utility can be very useful as well. You know, Bops, and I guess they don't have Sack anymore. Freedom doesn't have a lot of options. But, you know, Ret Pally actually brings a lot of good healing to the group. So it's like, why is Demon Hunter so strong right now? Because people think it is. It is strong. It's strong. But so are other specs. You know what I mean? You could easily... Rogue is the outlier because they bring Shroud. That's the deal breaker right there. Demon Hunter really is not that strong, man. They just have tremendous access to their damage. That's the thing. They have so much access to their damage. And I think it's that demonic talent or whatever. The I-beam one, whatever that one is. I think that's the problem there. As an arms... Well, okay, so now he brings up Warrior. I should have kept reading. It's frustrating me when I bring a lot of great stuff to the table. No, you don't. How could you even say this? What the fuck are you talking about? So this is the problem. Arms Warrior, Fury Warrior, they bring nothing. They bring nothing. Nothing. They bring a buff that you can get on a scroll. That is it. How has this happened? Who made this? Why did they remove Shockwave? I just don't understand, man. Let's see. All right. Biggest key issue. Key deletion getting taken away. No, that's not an issue at all. The problem is that you can't re-roll your key. I think we all agree on this, okay? Deleting keys was way too abusable. I can understand it was a bug to delete your lower key and get a higher key, but being able to use it as a low key, way to re-roll your key was way more beneficial. I agree. Being able to re-roll your key would be very nice, but deleting your key and get a higher key, this was too abusable. Should never have been in the game, okay? As long as you don't revert the system the way it was back in Legion to higher keys, Mythic Plus will still remain dead and not for the majority of the player base. This is my simple feedback for you devs. Well, okay, that's fine. You're fucking posting from 110, dude. Anyway, agreed the fact that the majority of the groups this week... Okay, I'm not reading all this. 2.1k Frost DK. Wow, Frost DK. That's unique. AD, I think this dungeon is more or less okay. He's going to do this for every dungeon, isn't he? We're going to read this, though, just based on his merit. You could potentially pull it down to 28 minutes and still time it quite easily. I agree. This key is just a mess. The Mythic Zero bug makes it trivial. Yeah, that should be abandonable, honestly. It's too rogue favored, particularly on weeks where you have the dog you have to push around. In terms of bosses, the first boss is really rough. On melee and high tyrannical, you get one shot. If it happens to get green slime thrown at you, yeah, I definitely agree. Harlan is too easy. I don't think I've ever wiped on that boss. Damn. You missed this week then. Shark boss is mostly okay. I have some issues with sharks being thrown on melee arbitrarily. King's Rest. I was surprised the timer for this wasn't increased. Yes, I am actually surprised as well. For the most part, the dungeon is fine. However, the timer and the lack of flexibility with pulls means that you basically need to brute force the whole dungeon with high DPS. I think third boss needs to look at. Totally agree. Some of the combos are extremely brutal, particularly in the last boss where you potentially have stuff like totems, plus charge, plus axes, plus poison all going over the same. Dungeon needs a bigger timer. Yeah, I agree. 100%. Shrine. I think this dungeon needs a lot of work too. It's like I'd like to see the mobs on the bridge towards third boss have stealth detect, because right now you end up having to Shroud and Viz pot. Elsewhere, they are insanely annoying to fight. Trash is otherwise considerably better than 8.0. Bosses in the dungeon feel exceptionally difficult to every other dungeon. First boss is trivial, but getting a 3-time surging rush is extremely hard to dodge and ends up one-shotting even if one hit on high tyrannical. 3-time surging rush is extremely hard to dodge. What? Are you kidding me? Am I missing something? Does it change on higher keys? It's like the easiest thing. You just look at where they're all facing. Second boss, obviously you don't get hit by it. I mean, anyway. Second boss needs to have the cast time interrupted or increased or reduced casts. Yeah, I could agree. Maybe you lock it out for a bit. If you interrupt it once, it can't cast again. Because you need Discord and 2 melee DPS in order to interrupt it properly. Third boss is slightly annoying. I don't know. Interrupting is important on that fight, but they give you a mechanic that, you know what I mean? They give you mechanics on the fight to make it so you don't need to interrupt. It's definitely very good if you can interrupt, though. Third boss is slightly annoying and high tyrannical. I don't particularly like having the MC mechanic be a DPS check, because if you don't kill it in time, it's basically a wipe. Is it? MC mechanic be a DPS check. Why is that? I don't know about that. That's interesting. Fourth boss needs an HP nerf. That has already happened. Siege. There's a lot of things I don't like about this dungeon. Me too. I appreciate the spotter mechanic, but at the same time, keeping it around makes me feel incredibly useless as a DPS, since we're basically waiting for the spotter to kill the trash for us. I think the spotters need to have points where they can no longer cross. Yeah, I fucking hate the spotter shit. I think they should remove that. Make the dungeon longer or easier, but remove the spotter. I don't know. Fourth boss in Siege is exceptionally more difficult than everything else. There's so many problems with the boss, I don't know where to start. It just needs an overall nerf. I've seen so many well-run keys go to crap because someone got hit by a crappy set of puddles. Yeah, that last boss is very odd. Temple, this dungeon is a lot better than it was in 8.0. My only thought is that the trash at the start needs stealth detect, or the trash percent required needs to be upped, as is you need a rogue to push this dungeon, otherwise you end up having to clear a lot of trash you don't need. Yeah, I could see that. Motherload, trash in this dungeon is so badly designed. The trash from second and fourth boss is so much more difficult than anything preceding it. Reduce the amount of trash at the start and nerf some of the trash after, or better yet, reduce a lot of the trash across the board and reduce the timer. Right now, the dungeon just feels like a huge trash grind. I love that. That's why I love Motherload so much. I really feel like, so there's 3 really difficult pulls in the dungeon, but I don't feel like the rest of the trash is any harder. I really don't. There's that robot type at the end. You know, maybe the last boss's trash is harder, but I don't agree the rest is. This is considerably better after the timer increase and the nerf to the first boss. I dislike the amount of accidental pulls this dungeon has. Could possibly fix with better mob spacing. Accidental pulls. Yeah, I guess some of the trash is really close together, actually. Toldagor. This is the first time I've read really anything about Toldagor. I think first boss HP needs a bit of a nerf, not because he's difficult. It takes way too long on Tyrannical. The fact, again, that you can't attack... This is the thing I hate. When you can't attack bosses in Mythic Plus. I hate this. This is my least favorite thing about some bosses. Dungeon has been fixed substantially. Very good. Not a lot of complaints. Would like less rogue dependence. Yeah, maybe just make these fucking lockpick things easier to do, huh? I would like the novelty of a door system, but at the same time, the left path is free timer, while anything on either of the right sides, up or down, is substantially harder. That's a big problem. This is even more evident on Necrotic and Sanguine weeks. We have very little room to move if you go right side first. It's also much easier to be selective with trash on the left-hand path, whereas on the right, you can very easily go over percent. Bosses are generally solid. I think this needs to be a bigger damage buff if the ads go on a pig boss, because right now you can basically ignore them with no consequence. Lord and Lady Waycrest feels overtuned, particularly where both of them are on high tyrannical keys. There's just not much that you can do as a tank to survive if the second part of the encounter goes on too long. Yeah, Waycrest is a bit odd. A note on tanks, running Toldagor with current Sanguine prefix. We lost a good 10 minutes because we were struggling to move mobs out of pulls. Yeah, I mean, Toldagor was clearly designed with that affix in mind, right? Without a knockback or some way to pull mobs through them, non-DK tanks are basically still dead on arrival on Mythic Plus. I disagree. When I could use Fear as a Warlock, that doesn't work at all for mobs. Has high probability of pulling extra and unwanted on Shroud skips. Just add True Sight to some of the mobs. It's weird that people would suggest this, right? Nerf the Shroud skips further instead of make other options. I don't know. But we're getting to the point now where, I mean, we're an hour and a half in and we still have hundreds of comments. So I think I'm going to call it here. I'm sure there's a lot of other really good posts, to be honest. 2K Healer. Let's read this one. 2K IO Healer. And overall, I love Mythic Plus's expansion. It's been very challenging and very rewarding. And some of the recent tuning that you've done has been great. Here's some specific feedback I have regarding the dungeons. Shrine. As many have already pointed out, the timer seems way too tight. The bosses combined with the mini-bosses on Tyrannical just have so much HP. The console fight is extremely difficult to manage, even for a coordinated group, but I can't imagine doing this in Pugs. As is discussed, the last boss has a huge health pool. Yeah, that was... I guess these were posted before they nerfed it, I guess. So many people brought it up, but I don't know how long it took for them to nerf it. Freehold. Eudora and first boss very punishing on high Tyrannical. The powder shots can easily delete DPS or healer if you have unlucky RNG and are targeted multiple times. We've also noticed that the last week of Fix, the combinations of Blackout Barrel with Grape Shot both being cast at the same time is just really bad RNG, but it's happening multiple times for us, forcing the DPS to eat the Grape Shot while trying to break out the person from the barrel. Yeah, that boss is really odd. It's like a Legion boss, isn't it? You know? I feel like it is. It's just Tyrannical makes it so much harder. On the Alliance side, this dungeon seems overtuned for the early trash. The Dockhounds are nearly one-shot territory. Yeah, I've never done an Alliance. Waycrest. RNG with the route you get ruining the key is just not fun. Making all raids more equal in terms of trash. 100% agree. King's Rest. Gold spits also are doing extremely high damage per tick. Would be nice to see this slightly tuned. Same with Severing Axes. I don't know. I guess they didn't nerf gold spits. People told me they nerfed it, but I guess they didn't. Temple. The dungeon did receive a lot of nice updates from the healer's perspective. It would be nice to have some slight tweaks to Adaris/Affix aspects as well as Galvats. For example, getting conduction right as static shock is going out, or having conduction on you, so you run out of the group only to be immediately targeted by Cyclone Strike. Doesn't give you many options. I don't know about all this, man. I think these mechanics work pretty well. It would be nice to see a bit more breathing room with the abilities. I guess it would be, but the fight's not, like, it's kind of short, right? I mean, compared to some fights, it's really don't, like, that boss doesn't really need to be, I don't know. And Galvats being one of the few healer checks with it already being so difficult on an easy week is nearly impossible on weeks with Grievous. I can imagine. Quacking, probably the best example there. I can only imagine Quacking is probably just really, really, really hard in there. I can't think of any fight in Legion that required that amount of output as a healer in Mythic Plus. I can. What was the name of it? The last boss in Eye of Ajara. The last boss in Eye of Ajara was that way too. It was probably even harder than Galvats on Grievous weeks because it was just so much damage. You had to constantly soak that mechanic. You had to constantly move. It was so hard. I think, a lot of this is just people don't have a very good memory, honestly, sadly. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited about Mythic Plus, and I'm sure there's a lot of... Oh, this was really highly rated. What the hell? Anyway, I'm very excited about Mythic Plus. I really enjoy it, and I'm glad to see a lot of people giving their feedback here. So my main real purpose here was to just kind of spread awareness of this. Go give your posts. All right, you know what I mean. Go give your posts. I'm sure there's a lot of feedback to be gained, a lot that you could discuss, a lot of things that this is not one of them. Okay, give us an alternative challenging system without a timer. It's just not gonna work, man. Instead, so this is my main thing. If you were to, if you're watching the end of this, congratulations yet again. You guys are awesome watching this whole video. But here's my final thing. The one thing I'd like to see, make it so we could at least in some way, affect our keys. Okay. I suggest putting the vendor in from the tournament realm and making it so you can buy those scrolls to change your key with some kind of currency that actually encourages you to change or to complete a Mythic Plus dungeon, okay? Make it so every time you complete a dungeon, you get some of this currency. And then you can use this currency to change your own key. Whatever you think, if you have to make it like more difficult to do or take very, very, very long so you can maybe only change one key a month or something like that, I don't know. But just give us some option to change our key. You're never going to balance all the dungeons with all the affixes. It's never going to happen. People need to stop thinking it will, okay? And the reason people are saying this nonsense, system without a timer, is because they don't like not being able to do certain things. You have to upgrade the key to be able to do difficult dungeons. For me, I would love to be able to just do a 20. Just to do a 20. I don't give a shit about the timer. I just want challenging dungeons that make the 5 people in the group actually have to care about the mechanics. 15, it's kind of that way. But because it's got a timer attached, people don't care. If they make a single mistake, they just leave. So I would rather there be a way to say, listen, we're not looking for the timer. I'm just looking to do the hardest content. I really like to do a 20. That would be doable with the suggestion I'm making. Allow me to upgrade my own key without actually, actually having to go through this grind of upgrading it in the actual dungeons with some type of currency. Allow me to change my key. Allow me to affect the key. Obviously, the affixes, you're not really going to be able to do that, but I would really like to say that. I think that would be the best one. Give us a player deterministic dungeon experience that isn't all about the esports go mentality. Sadly, this is the purpose of the system, okay? I would like if there was more than just that, but it's the purpose of the system. So probably the best way to end it. I look forward to seeing your thoughts. Again, if you watched the entire hour and 40 minutes, you guys are awesome. You guys are badass. There's a lot more comments in here. A lot of them are replies to other people, I'm sure, but go through it. This is our deal right here, okay? If you guys aren't aware of this post, you should be. Everybody should be trying to think about ways to make Mythic Plus the best it can be. And, if your ideas are to make Mythic Plus easier and less trash or whatever else, like, you can leave them. That's fine. If Blizzard does it, I'm not going to quit the game, obviously. But just realize that a lot of the feedback people are giving is not actually in line with how Blizzard wants Mythic Plus dungeons to go. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, thanks for watching. We will see you guys in the next one.